for those who have been listening to our latest episodes or catching up on the recent events, you don't need me to tell you that the news coming out of Myanmar right now is not good. You're probably following these stories because you care deeply about the country and the people on some level or another. The same concern is animating our own team's effort to produce content at a higher pace than ever before. Still, the heaviness of these topics that we're dealing with can sometimes feel overwhelming. Speaking for myself, it can be an emotional roller coaster to balance the optimism I feel witnessing the courage of the nonviolent protesters in the face of the military's aggressiveness, with the dread and anxiety that comes from seeing the Tatmada's terror tactics. With this in mind, we want to present a new series that will allow us to take a short respite from the intensity of the current events now taking place, but which will keep us firmly rooted in our love for the Golden Land. Titled Love Letters to Myanmar, episodes will feature a wide range of speakers who reflect back on what the country and the people have meant to them. In this series, guests will be sharing their warmest memories and anecdotes, discuss what life lessons they have learned from their time there, and talk openly about the role that the country has played in their lives. We'll be checking in with meditators, teachers, scholars, aid workers, exiles, diplomats, celebrities, and many more to showcase how widely the influences of how Myanmar has touched people from such diverse backgrounds. This series should not be seen as an escape from the current circumstances, and indeed, we firmly believe that part of our ethical responsibility at this time as people connected to the country is to stay informed, bear witness, and do whatever we can to help the people there keep open this narrow and rapidly closing crack of freedom. Rather, we hope this series can be something of a counterbalance to the sometimes overwhelming news streaming to us daily, if not hourly, and can help to remind us of why we all care so much about this region in the first place. In other words, these shows can keep our hearts firmly rooted in the Golden Land, while also providing a sense of renewed energy and perseverance as we face the latest developments and updates. With that, I'm really excited about the interviews that comprise this inaugural episode, and I want to especially thank Ashley Lewin, a Burmese American friend who conducted them, for her stellar job behind the microphone. Her curiosity, engagement, and active listening made me feel like I was right in the room with Ashley and her guest, and I think you'll feel the same when you listen. So first up, you'll hear from Lee, a Vipassana meditator in the tradition of SN Goenka, who had worked with resettled Burmese refugees in Dallas. From there, she moved on to New York City, where she made friends with the sizable Burmese community, and ended up joining a tech startup with a Burmese friend. That ultimately brought her to Yangon, where she was able to visit pilgrimage sites in her meditation tradition, as well as to attend and serve courses at the tradition's Burmese centers. Next up is Brey Sloan, who served as the Defense Attaché at the U.S. Embassy in Yangon. She describes how the country of Myanmar transformed during those years, and her personal encounters with figures ranging from Aung San Suu Kyi to General Min Aung Hlaing. She also speaks to the discomfort that many top military officials felt in interacting with her, as a woman in an equal position in the military ranks. Finally, we end with Evie, an Austrian yogi who has been going to the country for meditation practice since 1994, studying under teachers such as Sayadaw U Pandita, Shwe Oo Min Sayadaw, and Sayadaw U Tejaniya. She discusses how these spiritual teachings, along with the generosity she experienced in Burmese society, have transformed and enriched her life. So grab your favorite beverage and find a comfortable spot to relax, and settle in to be transported back to a place that, unfortunately, well, for now anyway, exists only in our memories. If you've had the fortune of ever visiting the Golden Land yourself, I hope these conversations trigger your own warm memories from your time in that country. I know it did for me. And if you've never been, sit back and enjoy the narrative tour that the following speakers will take you on. Oh, one more thing before I close out. Please make sure to stick around to take in a bonus feature appearing at the conclusion of these interviews, a roundtable discussion between me and several members of the youth organization Global Movement for Myanmar Democracy. Insight Myanmar podcast has been collaborating with this group to host an exciting virtual event on April 24th, in which artists from around the world will be donating their pieces, with all proceeds going to those in need in Myanmar now. Catch the full details at the end of this episode.
Hello, Lee. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, Ashley. Thanks for welcoming me. Thanks for inviting
Yeah,
me.
it's good to have you here. Can you share with us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. Let's see. I am an American. Lived in Myanmar before and just had connections to Myanmar in different parts of my life.
That's really interesting that you've had an opportunity to live in Myanmar and work there as well. Is there anything that you'd like to share with us about your time in Myanmar?
There's been various touch points in my life that I've been just connected or exposed to Myanmar. And the first would probably be in my younger years when I was introduced to my meditation practice. And, um, and my meditation teacher, Goenka, is from Myanmar and recognized that Myanmar had a crucial role to play in the history of the transmission of this meditation that I practice, um, and and then even in my career too, like growing up, after I graduated from college, my first job was working with resettled refugees in Dallas, Texas. And there I worked with Burmese refugees as well, of of different ethnic minorities, the Karen, the Chin, and the Karenni. Um, and and so that was, I can't say I remember growing up with Burmese people in my life, but I think a few of my early exposures or connections to Myanmar were those was in my work and also in meditation, and even when I moved to New York and met a few more Burmese people. There's more of a Burmese community here. Um, then I became friends with some of them, and then one of my friends invited me to work at a tech startup that he founded in Myanmar, and so at that time I was in a point in my career where I was trying to get away from my current job and trying to search for something new, um, and so I stayed there for a year. I worked with him in his company. Um, And of course, I also, it being the place where, as mentioned before, the meditation that I practice is transmitted. I also visited a lot of pilgrimage sites, and learned the language, and even did some service activities with the Burmese community there. Um, so so yeah, it was lots of rich experiences there, and also some contrasts with what I may have believed or thought before going there as well.
Wow. Yeah, that's amazing. It sounds like you had some prior exposure to Myanmar, through meditation and through some of your volunteer work. Um, and it sounds like your experience, your exposure to Burma was actually the opposite of mine, where you grew up in the West, knew about Burma, and then you went there. What was that like for you? Having had some understanding or knowledge of what Myanmar, Burma would be
Yeah,
like.
I think what really struck me when I first lived in Myanmar was kind of the difference between my impressions before going there and then how it actually was when I went. Because the people that I've talked to before going probably visited a few years back and talked about how quaint it was and like laid back. And but when I lived in Yangon, I felt like people were busy. It was quite a busy city. Um, it was busy traffic. The traffic was really congested in Yangon, and that was probably a much different kind of scene that my friends experienced. So I was there like 2017, 2018, and um, so I was sensing, I mean, it's still laid back, like, don't get me wrong, it's still laid back, but I felt like, well, Burmese people are busy, they have things going on, they're searching for the next thing, they're busy working, and so the pace of life was much quicker than I had expected. For sure, that was one thing that struck me. But there were also a few things that didn't surprise me so much at all. And like I said, I've had some exposure to working with Burmese people, and with the knowledge that they have a really strong Buddhist culture, like the ethics, the expression of themselves also comes through in that regard, because one of the first things I remember was when I was I think it was on one of my first 2 weeks visiting downtown near the Sule Pagoda area, and just noticed like a few people like passing around cups of orange soda from the back of their truck, just to any people that walk by, just like passersby, and then I was just observing. I was like, oh, what's going on there? Like, what's happening, And then as I got closer, I just realized they were just handing them to random people. Like, why? Because it was a hot day. It was a hot day. And why not? And that's just kind of, and that wasn't one of the only times that I've like observed those acts of charity in Myanmar, but there were a lot more instances, but that's like a very Burmese thing, as I came to know later. One of the things they do, and how they express generosity and like the sense of donation, as a kind of core principle of practicing Buddhism. So in that sense, there were some things that were also like heartened me and made me feel like, oh, so this is how it's like. Oh, it's like familiar, I should also mention, like, I also got to experience meditation being taught in Myanmar, as opposed to the way I've experienced it in the US, even from the same teacher and the same people in the community. I've had the opportunity to observe a few children's courses, like children's meditation courses there. And I think it was telling, because I think one of the things to note, like, if you want to find out or understand about a place and a culture, you can observe what they teach their children. And it was just really obvious watching the children that they were taught meditation at a really young age, and were able to sit still and, recite the triple gem, like just all in unison and by memory. And so that was a special experience, and I went to a few of the courses, even ones where they've taught even deaf children. So we went to was it an orphanage, or it was a deaf school, but like a boarding school for children that are deaf or hard of hearing. And the teachers are so creative in trying to teach meditation. It's kind of hard when you have to close your eyes, during meditation. And so how do you transmit that? And so that also was like, wow, they try really hard to even make this accessible to kids with disabilities. And the kids were also really genuine and like really, really like willing to learn. They were like helping each other with the instructions, like telling each other, like using sign language to tell each other like what the instructions were. I mean, later, like what they were really saying, or they also like asked like if meditation was taught being elsewhere, or for kids that are disabled elsewhere, and so they were also like really interested. So that was a really sweet experience.
Yeah, that's amazing. It sounds like you observed that in Myanmar, the Buddha's teachings through, maybe the precepts and just the meditation practice is just so deeply enmeshed in the culture and very valued. And so, having spent a year there and having, witnessed different settings for meditation and different acts of, generosity and those types of things, what role would you say that Myanmar has played in your life? Like, did it change the way you saw things, or the way that you related to things?
I think it taught me a lot about complexity, or just being able to experience firsthand the complex story of a place. Because like I think it's easy. I mean, this was probably the longest time I've stayed in I think any one country outside my own. And so it's easy to see from the outside, and simplify kind of a place. And I think in recent years, it's kind of been like that for Myanmar, like people within my meditation community, like the Golden Land, and it's a place where Dhamma, flourishes, or one of the last Shangri-Las kind of image, and it's a place of conflict and power struggles, and so people within my international development community may just be like, well, why go there, or is it safe, and so just kind of, and then it made me realize how, oh wow, like from the outside there's kind of one of those two perceptions, but living there, sometimes you can feel that complexity. Like, yes, it is a place to like find and learn, a way of being of peaceful, or learn meditation, and in some sense, it was all very safe when I was there too. Part of the reason why, seeing what's going on right now there with the military coup taking over, is so sad and painful, is because when I was there, it was so safe. You could just feel free to go anywhere, do anything, even like not worry about petty theft. Yeah, it was just a place burgeoning with so much growth. And so it's just really jarring right now, to see online these images of things that are happening in intersections that I've been in, and to feel that, like, yeah, my friends there are not safe anymore. It's just a completely different place now, versus then. And so, I mean, going back to like what I felt about complexity, is that like it's interesting being there, because you feel like it was safe, and also growing and expanding, but at the same time, you hear stories about, well, the military is actually still in power, or you're still reminded of the fact that like this country is like, I mean, transitioning, yes, but it's still trying to grow out of that, and so there are a lot of instances where you're reminded of that, and that complexity. So while it's shocking to see the things that are happening right now, it's also not surprising. It's just that kind of complexity that's there. So it's just yeah, it's just like no one-sided view to view these things. It's you can experience all sorts of feelings being there as well.
Right. Yeah, I love that you mentioned the complexity of it, because you're right. Like, even though they've made such progress over the last 10 or so years, there was always just that sense that the military was still, its presence was still there. The democracy that they were building was still very, very fragile. So
Yes, and actually, one of the things that I was most inspired by was just how creative Myanmar people were, and still like how in this period of transition and growth, there was so much hard work and so much resilience. Um, the just people trying to upskill, or like even like repats coming back from Singapore wanting to develop the country, and young people trying to educate themselves. And it was just I feel like I witnessed like some kind of like heyday of Myanmar, just like trying to modernize, and kind of the like really felt like the potential of what it could be. And of course it's all made up of the people there that really inspired. Like their drive was very inspiring, as well as their kindness, as I mentioned before.
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned the repats as well, because I've heard so many people that were either born in Burma or their parents were born in Burma that were making plans to go back to Burma and help recreate a more sustainable structure of a society, and that seems less likely with the military coup.
And that's the sad part.
So how are you managing right now with, seeing these images of places that you've been to in the past and seeing it transformed into what looks almost like a war zone? How are you managing, and do you have any message that you'd like to share with people in Myanmar right now?
Yeah, it's really jarring because like I'm about to choke up. Didn't realize this what happened, but like I just realized that like I haven't experienced before, like knowing friends, like like now I literally have friends that are under a military dictatorship, um, and so it just so it really does something to your world. You hear about conflict going on in places of the world, and it's like, and of course you feel things, and you feel horrible about them, but this just feels like it's so close. um and even just being there for 1 year, and so it's just so it is really jarring. I didn't realize, I didn't think I would get so choked up. um but like, yeah, it's hard. I think, just doing what I can, keeping track of the news every day, um checking in with my friends every now and then, and just doing little things that I could do, putting money in certain trusted fundraisers, um or protests or something, and so yeah, but it really feels like just closer to home. So yeah, and there's just like also the past like year, it just feels like there's been all these crises that feel closer to home. so so I think it's just a reminder of how kind of fragile our lives are, um and and yeah, so just um yeah, feeling really odd about my privilege too. It's been hard, but like, I mean, what can I say? I think it's a moment of transition. I think, like I said, like I've seen the potential of what Myanmar can be, um, and it's been very inspiring. Again, to watch how people are creatively protesting, um, and still like just upholding like very basic but like necessary and profound actions like nonviolence. And yeah, I think it could be a moment of significant opportunity. Like transitions are painful, but like it's also a sign that the old system's not serving us anymore. And um, one of the things that's I've seen across social media and is just noticing that there's there's more unity, it seems, across like the country than there has been before, like just across like all identity lines. Um, to have this desire to kind of course, having a common enemy helps, um, which is the military, and then but just transitioning to greater democracy. So I mean, if I had something to say to the Myanmar people right now, I would just say, really try to. I mean, they're already doing this, but just recognizing this moment, how critical it could be for unity, and that like even though the time is painful and there are like um cracks, um like that there's still like light, and that yeah, there's still opportunity to move beyond, and then of course this is what they're fighting for.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I think you said that beautifully. For a lot of people, they might assume that, Burma is, well, there's Burmese people that live there, but actually it's such a diverse country with just so many ethnic groups. And, they have their own languages and their own dress and their own regions. And I think that diversity can really create, well, it can create some different power struggles and different needs. And how do you juggle all of that? And yeah, like you, I've also felt, just awkward at times when I'm fixing myself a nice meal and knowing that there's friends and family members out there or strangers that are, you know, fearing for their life. It's really a weird feeling to, be in such a safe environment. It's almost like you're living in parallel universes at the same time. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like how can you be in the same
Right.
world at the
Right.
same time? Yeah.
So, well, thank you
Yeah.
so much, Lee, for
Yes.
everything that you've been doing to support the people in Myanmar. Whether it's attending protests or getting involved in different organizations, and just spreading awareness and really just caring about them.
Oh, no,
So
absolutely, Ashley. And I mean, of course, you've extended quite a few invitations to me as well to be involved. So thank you, and thank you for holding this talk. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
hi, Brey. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I am currently a retired Army colonel. I spent almost 4 years living and working at the U.S. Embassy in Yangon, and enjoyed almost every minute of it.
That's pretty incredible. Can you tell us a little bit more about it?
Sure. I was what we call the Defense Attaché. So I was the senior military person representing the U.S. government in the country of Myanmar. And so when I got there, it was directly after Cyclone Nargis had hit, so just about a month and a half afterward, and everything was still in recovery mode. And I was fortunate enough to be there during just the most fascinating time. When I first got there, like I said, it was just after Nargis. Aung San Suu Kyi was still under house arrest. The junta was very firmly in control. And then over the course of the next 3.5 years, the roadmap for democracy came about, and they had the first elections, and Aung San Suu Kyi was released from house arrest, and all sorts of very exciting things were happening. It was an exciting time to be there. every day something new would happen. It was just thrilling to open up the news every day and watch what had changed overnight as political prisoners were released and all these different things were happening. We were part of my job there was representational duties with other embassies and with other officials from the host nation, from Myanmar. And so we did a lot of entertaining in our residence, which was very close to the Chinese embassy. After the election occurred and when things were starting to open up and there was talk of lifting the international sanctions, we had a couple of business guys ask us if we wanted to stay in Yangon and operate a business for them. And we thought it sounded like a great idea, but the Army decided that they were not quite ready to let us go. So they sent us off to Japan afterward, and we never did manage to get back and do the business. But we would have loved to, because we very much enjoyed living in Myanmar for those 4 years.
How long were you there?
We were there, it was just under 4 years. It was 3 years, 10 months.
I see. And what were some things that stood out to you about the culture or the country that you enjoyed?
The country is absolutely beautiful. It is just one of the most beautiful places I know. It's fascinating if you get a chance to move about the country, especially if you know anything about the military history of the place. You see these immense mountain ranges in this extreme terrain that people had to operate over, and it just gives you a lot of more respect and admiration for the things that they were able to accomplish in that terrain. I wish we had been able to go all over the country. There were a number of places that we weren't allowed to go into because they were restricted. But I was able to go from Myitkyina all the way to Lashio and Taungji and any of a number of places in between, plus many times in Naypyidaw, which is not actually my favorite part of the country. But the people that we met, uniformly just wonderful people. We made a lot of friends. We were able to speak with people from all different parts of the country, and it was just a wonderful experience. It's an unusual place. The government at the time, not necessarily the most wonderful people, and certainly not the easiest to talk to or get to know, but you're just average Maung Maung on the street, very nice. And the kids, always wonderful. So it was a lovely place, a lovely time. It's one of my favorite postings that I had over a 30-year career, probably the favorite posting that I had. And the country and the people were a lot to do with that.
That's amazing that you mentioned that, especially arriving after Cyclone Nargis, that, this country was still one of your favorite postings because during Cyclone Nargis, I remember taking a flight to New York City to protest with some of the monks in front of the UN building because the government wasn't allowing any aid into the country. And I think like over 100,000 people had died because of the storm. So were you a part of the repairs and redevelopment of any parts of Myanmar at that time?
I was not. My predecessor was instrumental in working between the U.S. military and the government to get U.S. military supplies, relief supplies in. So there was actually U.S. military planes that landed in Yangon with relief supplies. I don't know if a lot of people know that. So he was the one who the main player in that, and it was a great experience for him as well, just to be able to actually make use of your position and bring relief supplies in. It wasn't a huge amount, but be able to do anything at all with the U.S. military to aid in the rebuild and reconstitution phase of the post-Nargis, I think is pretty neat. And he was very proud of being able to do that.
Yeah, yeah, I didn't know about that. I'm happy to hear that there was some aid let in. And really incredible, too, that you were able to travel about the country during the rest of your years there. I wonder if you have any particular memory or an instance that stands out to you.
Well, I very much enjoyed going up to Myitkyina. We went up there twice. And the first time we went up there, it was not as pleasant for me as the second time we went up there. And I'll explain that. I was the first and to date the only defense attaché who was a female uh, there posted in Myanmar. And when we first were in contact with the country about, arranging our visas and all of that information, they were very suspicious about why the U.S. was sending a female defense attaché, and they were sure that there was some complicated, intricate plot behind the whole thing. The ambassador, not the ambassador, the U.S. removed its ambassador after 1988 because of the mowing down of all the protesters and that whole disaster. So the U.S. took its ambassador out, and the previous three chargés d'affaires, which is what you call someone who's in charge of the embassy when there's no ambassador, had been female. And so the junta had gotten the idea that the U.S. was going to send female chargés d'affaires because Aung San Suu Kyi was under house arrest and we were poking them in the eye about it. Well, our chargé that was supposed to arrive a month after I did was a male. And so then they decided that the U.S. had made this switch over to send a female defense attaché and a male chargé for some reason. And it was just comical because our government never works that way. And, the idea that there's some plan to make a political statement through various and sundry personnel actions in different areas was pretty amusing. But they didn't know how to handle me. And so they ended up bending over backwards too far often, trying to make me feel welcome. And one of the times when we were up in Myitkyina, I got confronted with the Northern Army guys who absolutely did not feel that I was welcome there. And so we had a big welcome thing, and they put me at the wives' table. And my husband was with all the attachés. And I went over to our liaison and I said, I'm sorry, you all have made a mistake. I am supposed to be with the attachés. And the young major that I was dealing with in the intelligence corps, he was pretty sharp. He understood right away that this was not a good thing. So no, it's just a mistake. We'll fix this. And so he goes over to a table to tell them that I am going to be sitting with them. And this colonel from one of the regiments got up and just stormed out after yelling at him for a few minutes because I was obviously not welcome there. And so that was, I'd been there about 5 months, and that was really kind of a slap in the face. So I was pretty irritated by that whole thing. Fast forward a few years later, I'm now the dean of the attaché corps, and we get up there, and there is absolutely nothing like that occurring. They'd gotten accustomed to me, and I guess figured out that I wasn't on some super secret mission. And so they just treated me very well. And both times, once we got away from the military base and out into the city, it was never a problem. But it was just a marked change in how the military treated me over the course of that time frame.
Wow, that's pretty incredible.
It was fun. We did get, we were able to travel in places that most people aren't allowed to travel to, but there were plenty of restrictions. And so we had to balance trying to go to different places with how much trouble that might cause if we actually did it. Honestly, I was kind of public enemy number one to the Burmese military because, first of all, the relations with the U.S. hadn't been good for decades at that point. And so having a female U.S. person in charge of the attaché corps was a little bit difficult for them. And we used to get followed all the time. Our house telephones we knew they were listening into everything because you could hear them.
Mm.
There was a lot of surveillance activity, which can be stifling unless you have an odd sense of humor like I do, in which case I just thought it was pretty funny most of the time. But it was just a difference in how the government would handle us and how regular folks would interact with us. So, like I said, it's a very strong dichotomy between the Burmese people and the Myanmar military government.
Yeah, it sounds like your experience there was very unique in the sense that not many people were doing what you were doing, and on top of that, you had the military kind of looming over you. So,
honestly, it was a lot of fun, and the surveillance was those poor folks. They were kind of fun to play with. We went up to Pye one time, and most tourists don't go to Pye. It's not really a big tourist center. And you go from Pye, you can travel directly eastward and get back over to Naypyidaw over across the mountains. And so we went up there and immediately were picked up by the security services because we had government plates and a government vehicle. And we went to our hotel, checked in, and later on we went to dinner. It was just me and my driver. And so we went to dinner and we had our dinner, and there were these couple of guys that were over in the back of the restaurant watching. And when we left, we were walking out to the car, and I told my driver that I was going to tell him very loudly in the parking lot when we got back to the hotel that we were leaving at 8 o'clock, but really we were going to leave at 7 o'clock. And so he nodded, and we got back to the hotel parking lot, and I sternly told him that we were leaving at 8 o'clock and not to be late this time because otherwise he would be fired. And he, yes, yes, yes. And so the next morning we hopped in the car and left at 7 a.m. and they didn't show up until probably a quarter till. And of course we were long gone. And so, like I said, fun for me. Those poor guys probably got fired. But I told my driver later on, I said, we can do this one time. And everything was like a learning experience for them, one time, and they figured out how to counteract that. So there was a lot of that. It was fun in many ways. But because I had diplomatic immunity, I knew that unless I really stepped in it, they weren't going to do anything to me. I was concerned about my drivers. They were both local nationals. And so I was very careful not to put my driver into a position where he might get in trouble because he's not, of course, covered by anything like that. But having diplomatic immunity, it does give you a little bit of freedom.
Right, right. Yeah, earlier you mentioned this dichotomy between the military and the people in Myanmar. Can you share a little bit more about the people in Myanmar and what you observed?
When you're assigned in a position like this, a lot of your contacts that you have are at higher level governmental positions. And so those folks act like the government knows everything that they're saying to you, and they have to be very careful. And they do have to be very careful. So you would never really get the feeling that they were letting you completely in. There was always a little bit of a barrier. They just had to protect themselves. And that's completely understandable. But when you go out to a golf course, and the people that are at the golf course working, the girls who are the caddies and things, they're not government employees. They're just regular people. And while they're a little shy and a little worried, because especially if you're an American, then sometimes people come to question you about what you're talking about. Once they get comfortable with you, then they let you in. And I don't think there's a more generous and kind nation of people than the people of Myanmar. And it may be from, long history of difficulties, but they're just some of the most wonderful people I know.
Yeah, so it sounds like you felt comfortable around them and welcomed and
Oh,
warm.
very welcomed. I think to a large degree, at the time, I spoke Burmese language relatively well. I'm not going to say really well, but relatively well. And so when you're out traveling and you meet people and you're an obvious foreigner, but you've taken the time to try and learn their language, people do appreciate that a lot. And so I think in a lot of ways, just that ability made it easier for me to get in quicker with with local folks. Um, we traveled out to Sitwe one time, and it was far enough away from Yangon and a place that American tourists at least didn't go very often, weren't usually allowed to go. And so we were certainly an oddity, but we were welcomed warmly. And it's just, once you get to start talking with folks and they'll tell you some of their story and about their families, they're just wonderful, wonderful people.
I wonder how your time there has impacted your life now.
Some of it is from the friends that I made while I was there. The people always make your time in a place what it is. And I have great friends who are still there in Yangon. I have great friends who were assigned there from other countries at the same time. So I have friends all over the world, and our common link is our time in Myanmar. And just being part of the history, being part of the constitutional referendum, or just after that, and the Aung San Suu Kyi release, and the David Yetta nonsense, which got Aung San Suu Kyi 18 more months of house arrest. And then the government turning over and the election and traveling around and seeing the excitement and the joy of the election time, that's indelible. It makes you feel you're part of history and that you're actually were involved in supporting something really important. So I take a lot of pride with me in my time from Myanmar, and very warm and cherished memories, and of course concern for the friends and the people that are still there, and I'm no longer there.
I wonder if you got a chance to meet Aung San Suu Kyi while you were there.
I did, actually. I met her twice. The first time, it was an official meeting, and so our chargé d'affaires was the lead of the meeting, and my role was pretty much just to go in and answer any questions that the military might uh, be connected with and take notes and things like that. So I wasn't talking directly to her, but he was asking her questions, and they were having a discussion, and she is very charismatic. You can just sense her presence. And so when we came out of the meeting, I turned to one of the other folks that was there. I said, I can see why the generals are afraid of her, because if they let her get out and interact with people, they are going to be very drawn to her. She's charismatic is the only word I have for it. She's extremely charismatic. The second time I met her was right after she was released, and she came over to a party at the Chargé d'Affaires residence to thank primarily the local national employees of the U.S. Embassy. It's a very dangerous job to have. And so she wanted to thank them for their support and the U.S. for its support of her while she was under house arrest. And she met and that time we did talk a little bit more, and my daughter and son were there, and my daughter at the time was a college student down in Australia, and Aung San Suu Kyi was wanting to kind of connect with younger people more, for how to reach the younger ones politically. And so she asked my daughter if she had contact information so she could ask her some questions. And I didn't even have a business card, and my daughter didn't have anything. She ends up writing her name and phone number on a cocktail napkin from the U.S. Embassy chargé d'affaires. So that was slightly embarrassing, but she's wonderful in a lot of ways, and very very much a strong personality. And it's easy to see why the generals want to keep her under control. I think they recognize that she has something that they don't have. And that's just this presence that people are drawn to.
That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing.
You're welcome. Thought you might like the cocktail napkin bit. My poor daughter is highly embarrassed about the whole thing to this day.
Right. Yeah, that was a very momentous time when Aung San Suu Kyi was released. And again, here we are, history repeating itself. How have you been doing with the recent events in Myanmar?
It's so frustrating to see. It feels like all the progress that we made and everything that everybody was working for just has been not necessarily thrown out the window, but certainly not. It's of course not good. It's very sad to see the deaths that are happening from people peacefully protesting, the military just reacting in such a harsh and unyielding way.
Mm-hmm.
There were, I've met Min Aung Hlaing. I've met a lot of these guys, and yeah, I mean, they're not your cuddly grandpa types, but and perhaps it's naive, but you kind of hope that when you've all gone through this evolution together of ending the military rule and releasing Aung San Suu Kyi and having the election and then having another election and then having another election, to have it's like having the rug pulled out from under you, to see all the house of cards just come tumbling down. And I worry about people. I worry about the future, honestly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're the first person that I've met, and maybe the only person that I'll ever meet that has met Min Aung Hlaing. So I'm curious to ask you, what do you think his motives are? Any thoughts on that?
I think it's just power. And, you saw the same sort of thing with Than Shwe,
Mm-hmm.
just an inability to release or let go. And that's why it was such a big deal when they actually did the first election. And we were kind of surprised that Than Shwe, even though he may have been, behind the scenes doing the puppet master thing, which is most likely, just the fact that he was no longer the head of government was a pretty big shift. And Min Aung Hlaing, when I met him, and you have to realize this was back in 9 years ago, he was brand new in that position, and I don't think anybody really knew where they were going at that point. It was, I mean, yes, they had a plan, but I don't think their plan was, let's do this for 9 years and then take over again. I think that the situation is very similar to the original election that got Aung San Suu Kyi thrown into house arrest.
Mm-hmm.
The generals believed their propaganda and were very surprised when the country's vote turned out not to be supportive of them. And I think there's an element of panic involved, and the realization that if the people in the country don't want them in charge, then the only way they can be in charge is to just take charge. And you also have to remember that these guys in the military have been told by the moment they've gone to the Defense Services Academy or enlisted that they are the protectors. They are the only ones that have enabled Myanmar to be able to come through all of the crises that it's had. So the folks who are in charge, they've had decades of believing that if it weren't for the military, the country would have been destroyed, overrun, what have you, long ago. And it's very difficult to turn that vision of yourself as the good guy into recognizing that maybe you're not the good guy. That's a difficult psychological move to make.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think they're not really interested in looking at themselves. They're interested in maintaining their power, and they now know that the only way they can do that is through intimidation and through all the violence that we've been seeing.
Right. So it sounds like you're saying that they actually believe, some of these generals actually believe that what they're doing is the right thing, and therefore their acts of violence are justified. Is that right?
I am quite sure that some of them believe that they are doing the best thing possible for the country.
Wow. Yeah, that explains a lot. So, having seen what's happening in Myanmar now, what are your thoughts, visions of what could happen moving forward?
This is going to be a very difficult thing to get through. I did like what Barack Obama said not that long again. There are a lot of people with a lot of courage that are standing up to what's going on and pointing out what is wrong and protesting for what is right. And this isn't something that's going to get fixed very quickly. And what Obama said was you have to be strategic in your courage. So not just plan for the now or act in the now, but plan for the future so that you can still act in the future. A friend of mine, very good friend of mine, who's a political expert, he's an Australian guy. He just put out a thing saying if you split the generals away from the rest of the military, we may have a chance. And I tend to agree with that. Where you have the problem with the mindset is primarily with the officer corps. You don't have it as much with the enlisted. They do grow up in that system, and they're the main ones on the ground, but they are definitely under this very strong control of the officer corps. Mm-hmm. And the officer corps is very much steeped in the we are the protectors, we are the guys in white hats, so to speak. So I don't know if there's a way to split the generals from the enlisted, but I do think there's two. They're not the same. They don't have the same viewpoint.
Yeah, it sounds like the soldiers beneath the generals are just operating under their orders.
They are. I'm sure there's got to be a spectrum of behavior. So there are going to be those who think that this is all fine and dandy, and there are going to be those who are really very upset and appalled about what is happening, but they're not going to necessarily be in a position to do much of anything about it. And that's the problem. Unless enough of them do something or refuse to do something, it's got to be a huge number for that to sink in or to make a difference to what the top military guys are doing. Mm-hmm. So whether they can or not, I'm not sure.
Thank you for that insight, Brey.
So you may have just the military as a whole having problems, internal dissension. There's another player that's also important in this and may be even more important, and that's the role of the monks. The monks have always been very important in how things happen in Myanmar. During Nargis, the monks were the ones that did the vast majority of relief. When I was giving, I brought school supplies and food and stuff down to one of the hard-hit areas in the Delta, and I took it to a monastery because that's the only way I knew it was actually going to get to where it needed to get to. There are some monks at the top levels that are intertwined with the military to the point where they will support anything that the generals do. But there's a lot of monks that are probably quite appalled and very angry about what is going on. And that's a movement that, if that can be tapped into without causing the military to overreact against them, I think that would be of great benefit. The military has to be very, very careful with how they deal with the monks. They may, if they overreact, it'll be like kicking a hornet's nest. Then you will get people very, very enraged, not just angry and protesting, but absolutely enraged. And so I think the military has to be careful. Honestly, I haven't heard that much about monks speaking out. And it's probably just because there's so little information that I'm able to get about what's going on the ground in there. I'm sure there are folks doing it, but it would be interesting to me to know what the monks are doing in this whole affair.
Right. Yeah, I have seen some images of monks protesting, and there's been a few letters of relatively well-known monks, taking a stand against the military. However, there are still other monks that are quite well known and respected that have not spoken out.
It's difficult. Especially if you're, extremely well known, you're putting yourself right out in the middle of everything. And so some may feel they have a better opportunity of influencing things from behind the scenes. Others may feel that it's time to jump in with both feet. I don't know. And that's kind of how everybody is. You're going to have people who wish they could, be the one standing out in front, but they're doing all that they can more behind the scenes. So you can't really say, well, if you're not getting beat up, you're not doing it right.
Right.
There's a lot of people that are doing a lot of things, having to hide people, just all the stuff that's going on over there right now. There's a lot of things that people are doing and being very brave about all of it.
Right. Yeah, there's people having to relocate every night just to stay safe.
It's crazy. The reports of, the police just coming into your house and doing whatever they want to and pulling people out and throwing them into who knows where. It's awful. It's just awful.
Right. Yeah, they're really living in a state of terror right now. And,
Yeah.
Honestly, it will impact the monks as well down the road. The longer this goes on, everybody in the country will be impacted by it, not just the lay people.
Oh, yeah, I agree.
Yeah, so with that said, do you have any words of encouragement for the people in Myanmar right now?
I wish I could. I wish I could solve the problems. I would say throughout everything, try and stay as strong as you can. Know that there are people all over the world who support you and wish they could do more, but also understand the realities of what is possible and what is not likely to happen. In the end, I can only hope and pray along with everyone else who loves the country that you'll get through it and things will improve. But it's going to be a long road. This is not going to happen. It's not going to be fixed overnight. There are people trying to help, and just remember that there are people that know the misery that you're going through and are earnestly wishing for everything to be resolved.
Do you see any other role that the U.S. could play at a time like this?
I think the U.S. is pretty much limited to what they can do diplomatically and economically. Military is probably not going to. That would be a difficult sort of a thing. But financially, we do have some leverage. Diplomatically, we have leverage, and I've loved watching all of the Myanmar government officials who refuse to be called back home and support the CDM. So that's been encouraging to watch. But this is difficult, and it's because not just U.S. in isolation, but looking at the region. You have ASEAN and its lack of reaction. You have China and what it is doing and what it will allow. China isn't just going to sit back and say, "Yep, U.S., come on in and send lots of troops." That's a big problem. That's a geostrategic problem. So I don't think that it's going to be possible for the military to get involved, the U.S. military to get involved in this. We're going to have to do this another way, but there are other ways that the U.S. can put pressure to hopefully change things.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I know a lot of people wish that the U.S. would just send divisions over and make the generals stop and bring peace to everybody, but it's I hate to burst the bubble, but that's just an extremely unlikely scenario.
Having been in Myanmar for 3 to 4 years between 2008 and 2011 or 12, does it at all surprise you the way the protests are going right now?
No, actually, it doesn't surprise me. In addition to political changes that were going on, there was a lot of societal changes that went on at the same time. When we first arrived, for example, there was no internet at the residence at my house, and they were just starting to offer internet, but the startup cost was extremely high. It was like over $2,000 to have internet installed in your home. Obviously, the government didn't want everybody having internet access. And we would go back and forth as the internet kind of grew in the general populace. There would be sites that you couldn't get to. One of them, which made me laugh, was I was doing triathlons at the time, and I was trying to sign up for this triathlon, and it told me it was a restricted site because it was political. I'm just like, how is this political? Okay, fine. And so there was always, the government having the control over social media, and even though it was kind of in its infancy at that point. They would turn off the internet, and then they would say that there was an underwater cable that needed to be repaired. But they turned the internet off right before the elections in 2011, which really surprised nobody. But they didn't want people having access to information into the outside world. So that was back in 2011. Bring that forward 9 years, people have got accustomed to being able to interact with each other and to get information from outside the country much more easily, not 100%, but much more easily. And I think now people, they have a comparison that they can make between what's going on in their country and what's going on in the outside world that they didn't necessarily have before. So people can see that what's happening in Myanmar right now is not the way things happen in all countries. And so that gives them an additional fuel, so to speak. Just having that bit of knowledge and information that they didn't have before, they're a much more educated and socially aware group. And so I think that's good. That's a benefit for them. Anytime you have more information, it's good. But the access, they know what they have had, and now it's getting turned off again, and the power is getting turned off, and they're losing more than they were losing, say, back in 1988, when there wasn't that sort of thing that was available. And so what they're losing is much more obvious to them now. And I think even though they've always fought hard, the ones who are protesting have always been courageous and brave. But I think now they might be just a little madder because in addition to everything that they're facing, the change from where they have been over the past 10 years is very dramatic, and they don't want to lose that. And so I think they've just got that extra little edge that they hadn't had before. And that's a good thing, because I think the leadership is going to learn that once people have something, it's much more difficult to take that away than to never give it to them in the first place. And so I think they will fight more.
That's a beautiful point. Thank you.
Not just for the change, but to get things back the way they want them to be, that they know they have been, the progress that they had made.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of that before. That's a really great point. Do you have any last words, Brey, before we end?
I'd like to finish just by saying that Myanmar is an amazing country with amazing people going through a very hard time right now, but I am convinced in my heart that they will be able to get through this and get past this, and things will be better because the people are strong and the people are good. And whatever good thoughts I can send, I'm sure Myanmar will come out of this okay. I don't know how long it'll take, but it'll get there because the people deserve it to be better.
One of the most tragic aspects of the current crisis in Myanmar is how isolated Burmese protesters feel, and, in fact, are. This has been compounded by bank closures, and as a result, ordinary wire transfers are not possible. Thankfully, through a trusted local network, we're able to ensure that all donations successfully reach their intended target. So if you found yourself moved by today's discussion and want to do what you can to help, please consider giving to our fund, which is 100% directed towards supporting the movement. If you would like to join in our mission to support those in Myanmar who are resisting the military coup, we welcome your contribution, in any form, currency, or transfer method. Every cent goes immediately and directly to funding those local communities who need it most. Donations go to support such causes as the Civil Disobedience Movement, CDM, families of deceased victims, and the purchasing of protective equipment and medical supplies. Or if you prefer, you can earmark your donation to go directly to the guest you just heard on today's show. In order to facilitate this donation work, we have registered a new nonprofit called Better Burma for this express purpose. Any donation you give on our Insight Myanmar website is now directed to this fund. Alternatively, you can visit our new Better Burma website, which is betterburma.org, and donate directly there. In either case, your donation goes to the same cause, and both websites accept credit cards. You can also give via PayPal by going to paypal.me/betterburma. Additionally, we can take donations through Patreon, Venmo, GoFundMe, and Cash App. Simply search Better Burma on each platform and you'll find our account. You can also visit either website for specific links to those respective accounts, or email us at info@betterburma.org. In all cases, that's Better Burma, one word, spelled BetterBurma. If you would like to give in another way, please contact us. Thank you so much for your kind consideration.
Hello, Evie. Thank you so much for joining us. Can you tell me a little bit about yourself, who you are, where you're calling from, what your connection is to Myanmar, and what did you do there?
Okay, my name is Evie, and I am living in Austria, in Vienna. And since 1994, I've been going to Myanmar. Since 1994, the reason why I went to Myanmar is because of meditation. I am doing vipassana meditation, and I started with U Pandita, and then I went on to several other monasteries. And then in the end, I finally landed with Shwe Oo Min Sayadaw. Shwe Oo Min Sayadaw Ji, I must say, because I was happy or lucky that I could still meet Sayadaw Ji of Shwe Oo Min from 2000 to 2002. I was meeting him. He was still alive for the 2 years I was there. And since then, every year I would go to Shwe Oo Min for meditation because I found my teacher there.
Thank you. And can you share a story or an anecdote about your time in Myanmar?
I can, I can tell you my impressions in short. My impressions of my impression, the first, and still it is there, it is still my impression whenever I go to Myanmar or whenever I'm in Myanmar or in the streets of Yangon. For me, it is like a fairy tale. It's like a fairy tale. It's like out of a storybook which I know from my childhood. I can remember the pictures, and the pictures in my fairy tale books. They look exactly like many sites in Myanmar. So that is still very fascinating. And what else is, and then the other thing what I learned myself is to be much more generous than I was before. The generosity, the way Myanmar people are generous is for us Westerners, we don't know this kind, because we get the services sort of first and then we pay. Yeah? But we have to, I had to learn, and nobody told me that I have to give dana, that I should give dana, lunch dana. I didn't know. It took me only the third year I realized, hey, no, I should not pay in the end, but I should give dana, and dana here and dana there. Okay, so then I knew the system, which made me happy. So generosity was something which I really learned. And the second, what I learned from that culture is this, how to say, not complaining. I like to complain, but Myanmar people, they don't complain. They have such a hard life and they don't complain. So this too, I really have learned, apart from vipassana, I mean from my daily impressions there. Yeah, so these are the two main things which I learned from the people. I must say, as a Westerner, it is not easy to be confronted with this poverty, which I don't know, which makes me feel always a little bad, because I am in a monastery and I have wonderful food, and then I think, my God, yeah, so many people don't have that much. So this is one thing which really does make me somehow uncomfortable. Yeah, but as I said, this non-complaining, and when I look in some faces or in many faces of people, and especially of children, then I'm so overwhelmed, because I see so much innocent there. I look into the eyes and they are so innocent and so bright, and really that I was saying, wow, this is so incredible. This is so incredible how they cope with what is, really. So my impressions.
Beautiful.
Yes.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. Do you have any particular memory that you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, I do have. When I walk or drive through villages or through Yangon or wherever there are people, it's overwhelming for me to see how much life there is. There is life coming out from every gap of a house. It's everywhere, so much life, so incredible. There's so much life. Maybe I should not compare, but I do. When I look where I am, I'm in Vienna. Austria is a rich country, and Vienna is a very clean city, and everything is very orderly. Everything is managed perfectly well. Everything functions, everything. And yeah, but this type of life which comes out as it is in Myanmar, this from everywhere, this we don't have. So even this is a big city where I live. Myanmar is much more of a city to me than Vienna. It's so strange. Yes, that is also a big impression what I have.
Yeah, so it's a pretty lively city.
So I am meditating since a long time, and I had a few teachers, but my present teacher, I have him nearly now for 20 years. Who is U Tejaniya? And U Tejaniya was different from the other vipassana teachers I had. The other teachers were very strict and very careful about noble silence and I don't know what, and being very slow in the movement, like Sayadaw, and so. And I tried to follow that, but it was really very hard. Not only for me, I guess for everybody. And I did it, but I couldn't see. I had no understanding. No understanding would arise, and I could see that my mind is very tense, and everything, the body, everything went so very tense. It was really a big fight for many, many years for me, and it was not a pleasure at all. It was just a big struggle. And then I came to U Tejaniya at Shwe Oo Min, and U Tejaniya had a complete different teaching method. He said, first of all, he said to me, "Why are you so tense? Relax. You must relax. Relax is very, very important. If your mind is tense, your body is tense, how can you understand anything, right?" And yeah, okay, so I tried to relax and I tried to relax, but because I had these years of looking and moving slowly and labeling, so it was really difficult for me to understand what he meant by relax. So finally, I somehow got it, and I relaxed a little more. And he said, relax, just relax, 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 don't expect anything. And then he said something which is a very important message. He said the following. He said, when you meditate, you don't think that this is right or this is wrong how I do. As long as you are interested in meditation, as long as you are interested, that is what counts. The interest is what counts. And that, and all this, what he told me, that made me more and more relaxed. And then slowly understandings were coming. And I remember when I had the first retreat with Sayadaw U Tejaniya, I remember that I had sort of little tiny little insights, like little stars coming. It was like stars. So wow, and so like this. And then that settled down, and then of course I also struggled with my meditation and understanding, and so it's a long way. But I myself cannot judge so much how much I changed, but I do think that I have, my understanding of meditation has absolutely changed. Yeah. And I in fact do not do too much of a formal meditation, but during the day, I really try to remember mindfulness. I try to remember sati, and then I go and I check what is in the mind, and I feel, it's a matter of feeling. It's a matter of being, of living. In fact, it's a matter of living in the moment. It's how should I say? Maybe it's not. It's being aware, but it's not. It's not the case of watching. It's just being aware that a feeling is happening, that a thinking is happening, that seeing is happening, that the smelling is happening, that the hearing is happening, that the touching is happening. It's a feeling, and just being aware of that. It sounds very easy, but especially I think even for Westerners more difficult. It's not. It takes a long. I mean, for me, it takes a long time. Others are more fast than me, but it's okay. So yes. So yes, and I want to say, and when I am in a feeling and being aware of that feeling, so really, so there is no more in the mind or very, very little, then there is this incredible feeling of being alive. It's so incredible. It's a feeling of being alive, and everything else before is not being alive. But of course, I fall back into the old patterns. This is, yes, I do. But yeah. At least I have some understanding of what it means to live and to be free of moha for a little time, even if it's just for a minute or so. It's just this feeling. And this feeling is also, I mean, this is my personal understanding. This is not what my teacher taught me, but it has become very, very clear that everything, we are all one. Everything, we are not apart. Yeah, this is one system or one nature. Nature is I can only call it nature. That we are just part of nature, just like a bubble. It's like we are bubbling and then we disappear, and then comes up another bubble, and so. But it's all one. So yeah, so far.
Thank you so much for that explanation. And so, what would you say the role that Myanmar has played in your life over the last 25 plus years that you've been going to Myanmar to meditate? How has it affected your life?
Yeah. When I go to Myanmar, I go for meditation. This is the very first thing what I do. And when I am in the monastery, I regard it as a training camp for sati, for mindfulness. So when I'm not in Myanmar, so every year I go there, usually, and that makes it easier for me during the year to remember sati, and to be in touch with with insight, with life, to be in touch with life. In my words, you know what I mean. Yeah, this is a very big thing. Yes.
Thank you. All right. And do you have any words of encouragement for the people in Myanmar right now with what they're experiencing?
Also, first of all, I must tell the people of Myanmar that I am so impressed that I find no words. I'm so impressed by their determination and by their understanding that they have no choice but to go. There is no choice left but to go. There is no choice. So, and the young people usually, which may not have such understanding, but this they understand so very, very well and deeply, that they all go, but of course all the other people too. And this is one thing which impresses me tremendously, really. I have no words to describe this. And the second thing also, how they organize. Because from my experience, there are many things in Myanmar which I absolutely do not understand, or the logic behind, or whatever. But in this case, how in this CDM, in this civil disobedience movement, they organize themselves. They are so creative, so it's incredible. It's fantastic. So I do what I can. Yeah, I always say the only thing I can do is making noise. Yeah, what can I do? Yeah, but the only thing I can do is making noise, and this I try to do. I try from what I can. So, and I know that, and I'm expressing myself on Facebook, yeah, and I know should the military win, but I really hope not. I'm sure I will not be allowed to enter Myanmar. I know, but for the people, they're doing fantastic, and I am really sure that if they can persevere, if they can go on, I am so sure that they will win. How can the military rule people who practice disobedience? This is impossible. And also, I think this is such an intelligent move, to make this sort of other government, this shadow government, and that this minister, I don't know his name, but this minister, he is a minister under Aung San Suu Kyi, I think, for sports and people, but I don't know his name now. And where he said that the civil servants should not go to their offices, should not. And again, and they should put their name on the list if they join the CDM, yeah. And this was so fantastic. And I'm going tomorrow. Today it's too late for me, but tomorrow I will make comments to Shwe to Shwe I will make notes to what he sent. He sent an article from the Irrawaddy, and I will make comment on that. But this is tomorrow. So for me, Myanmar people really so terribly, really, really very, very impressed by their perseverance, by their intelligence, and by their creativity, and by their solidarity, really. So I cannot say more. And I with all my heart, I stand behind my little self, and I press my thumbs for them, and I pray for them. I do, in fact, every day. I say, please. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing, Evie. Do you have any final words that you'd like to share?
Yeah. Of course, people should not forget Sati. And we Westerners, I can say now for the Westerners, we Westerners should make as much noise as we can. Really, as much noise as we can, and do everything what we can think of, we can do to support Myanmar people.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for making noise on Facebook and encouraging others to get involved as well.
Thank you.
All right. I'm joined here by a number of members from the team of the Global Movement for Myanmar Democracy. This is the first time we've been able to welcome so many voices at once on single podcasts. So it's quite exciting to be able to check in with a number of people at the same time. And we're actually collaborating with them for an event that will be happening very soon that we'll be talking about a bit on this episode. But before we do that, we just want to learn a little bit about this organization, who they are and what they do, just get a general introduction. So, Sandra, could you kick us off by talking a little bit about what this organization is?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Sandra. I'm one of the execs and co-founders of the Global Movement for Myanmar Democracy, which we'll call GM4MD for short. So GM4MD was founded by myself and two other of my co-founders, Jen and Frank, who are on the podcast today, in response to the military coup to coordinate international action to support Myanmar's democracy. GM4MD started off as a private Facebook group. We wanted to bring together these youth activists that were popping up on the social media space and provide them a platform to collaborate. And from there, we realized that Facebook wasn't the best place to actually collaborate over projects. And we made a Slack space. It's a new platform where you can better collaborate on projects. And from there, realized that there wasn't a platform for a youth-led grassroots network. So that's what GM4MD serves as today. We have a core team of about 40 individuals from all across the world. And our goal is to raise awareness and raise noise about what's happening in Myanmar and empowering these new youth activists and organizers to do so. So we're trying to achieve this through a couple of lenses. The first is our global campaigns. This is our way of connecting with the Myanmar diaspora, Friends of Myanmar, and the broader international community about how what's happening in Myanmar is a global issue, and it can affect someone even if they may not have a relative in Myanmar or maybe of Myanmar descent themselves. And beyond that, we have a couple of other projects in wellness as well. We see that the coup in Myanmar is affecting the mental health and well-being of not only those on the ground, but also those of the diaspora. And with mental health being so stigmatized, especially among Asian Pacific Islander communities, we wanted to make sure that in the work that we do, we are mindful of burnout and grieving and giving people the space and resources to cope. And so from our global campaigns and our wellness committees, we have a wonderful team with skill sets across storytelling, fundraising, data science, advocacy, and we have members that are from all across the world, young and old, different ethnicities. But we really do take pride in how we are a youth-led organization and using our savviness with social media, media spaces, and mass organizing to accomplish our missions.
Yeah, that's great. And it also reminds me of what's happening in Myanmar, how this came about as something that no one really expected, or even those that expected it might not have thought it would really happen. And then everyone in the country, as we've been seeing, have had to respond in ways that were completely unpredicted and just do what they can to serve the greater moment. And so it sounds like what you guys are doing outside of Myanmar is in that same spirit, that you're coming together with whoever you were before February 1st, whatever it is you were involved in, whatever life obligations and other things you have going on, that you are setting up a similar kind of structure and enthusiasm and work effort to work towards this goal and support those that are in the country as you are outside and kind of following in that same spirit. So that's really exciting. And there's so many things that you're doing. There's so many committees and so many activities and initiatives. And this is definitely something that we'll have later episodes on, exploring exactly all the different things that you are doing and just letting people know that are concerned about this issue, where they can go to learn more, to be involved, because there's certainly a lot for everyone to do. And one of the things I've been saying to people that when they hear about this and they say, well, I feel helpless, or I feel guilty, or I'm not there. And okay, that's a fine feeling to have for a couple of weeks when the shock hits you. But once you get over that, there's really no need to feel guilty or helpless about anything. There's a lot that all of us can do given our given whoever we are, what we have to offer, whatever our limitations are. And it's just a question of finding what those things are and how we can be involved. And, this is an open book that's still being written, and everything that we're doing has an effect on how that story is going, just as what you guys are all doing.
Exactly. That's the mission of GM4MD, is to empower the, average individual who's at their home and feeling like they can't meaningfully contribute, and introducing them to a community and network that can help mentor their skill sets and finding meaningful ways to contribute to what's happening on the ground. And so we have a couple of members of GM4MD, our co-leads, as we call them, of the committees, who've been doing this important role of not only contributing their skill sets, but also mentoring and providing an avenue for individuals across the world to come together and collaborate on meaningful projects.
Yeah, and that's great that you're fitting in so many different parts of what's going on. You mentioned the mental health part, where you're looking at the whole person and every way that people are being affected by it. And one of those avenues that we're going to talk to a bit here is this idea of fundraising. Can you just tell me generally, like, what is your fundraising been like? What is it? How has that been going the last couple of months?
I think we have a pretty good progress so far. We raised about 11,000 in a month. So, and we have reached, I think, half of our goal so far.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And when you are able to get the funds into Myanmar, what generally are you supporting at this time?
So as I mentioned, we are supporting the medical supplies and services. So we actually support to buy the medical supplies. And so, but I think Ashley can actually talk more in details, like where exactly they're helping.
Right. So of the $11,000 that we've been able to receive from donors, we've been able to distribute at least half of that to doctors at the Myanmar-Thai border, as well as some of the doctors in Yangon, which was hit the hardest by the military. So some of those funds are being used for, emergency response kits, chest tubes, surgical blades, PPE, medications. And so we hope to use the rest of the funds for other groups that are also really in need right now, that are in Myanmar and also the border. And we're really grateful for all the donors that have contributed so far. And we really hope to keep the fundraiser going, which is why we're doing this art auction.
Thank you so much for providing some perspective about what GM4MD is doing on the fundraising end. I just want to give some perspective about what fundraising looks like overall. And fundraising is so important to support those on the ground, because it is what is moving and keeping the civil disobedience movement alive in Myanmar. And for those of you who don't know what CDM is, the civil disobedience movement, it's, in brief, boycotts and protests by those on the ground, so that they don't support military owned businesses and corporations, and that's their way of choking up the military internally. And this means that there are families all across the nation that currently are not able to work, nor are getting paid to work. And that's why diversity of fundraisers are so important. It's difficult to get money onto the ground because they have to go through private networks, as Jasmine mentioned. And when GM4MD was thinking about how can we most meaningfully contribute to fundraising, it kind of goes back to our overall mission. GM4MD is a new organization, and so our goal overall is to not reinvent the wheel, but to, again, empower efforts that are existing and connect young individuals or new individuals in this activist space to the efforts that are already ongoing and well established. So when we first thought about what can we do that's most effective with fundraisers, is that we saw that there were so many fundraisers out there already, through GoFundMe, through individual websites, through different organizations. And it was hard to keep track of where to donate and how to donate. And so we started off with collecting fundraisers on our page. And through this page, we provide 3 different categories through which people should and can donate. Some of them are targeted towards certain ethnic groups or IDPs or refugees. Other categories include supporting CDM directly, so supporting individuals and families in their daily lives. And a third is like broadly a cause close to our heart. So whether that be providing food, whether it be healthcare or media, it's through these three categories that you really do need a diversity of fundraisers and consistent amount of fundraisers. And that kind of goes into the three different ways that people are fundraising now. So the first one is through one-on-one support, where someone can sponsor an individual or family on a monthly basis and provide a certain amount of money, like $100 that will last them for food and living expenses. The second is donating to a diverse network where you donate to one individual or one fundraiser, and they, within their private networks, disperse the funds to different ethnic groups or different areas. And then the third is kind of what the CRPH did, was a Google form method where you sign up your own email and then you put in your own amount that you like to fundraise and donate, and then it goes off into this big organization. So that's what GM4MD has been working hard on, to first just collect all the different organizers and fundraisers out there, organize it so that people can then look at this webpage and know what they're donating to.
So yeah, you can imagine that like $100 of your donation can actually support a family for a month, and which is actually amazing. That but when we think about it, like $100, we would only like last for less than a week here, but it can support people in Myanmar, like the whole family for a whole month. So yeah, which is fantastic. So yeah, that's what I want to like relay messages to like potential donors and the listeners.
Right. So we have this event that's coming up, and it is also timed a bit around Earth Day. So perhaps you could share a bit about how the thought process came for this and how Earth Day fits into this event that you have going on.
So yeah, so GM4D, we strayed away from hosting our own fundraisers at first, just because we thought there were a lot of organizations dedicated towards fundraising that was doing this more effectively. And GM4D's mission was, primarily about raising noise, raising awareness. But as we do have a component to wellness and health in mind, and we have a lot of team members who are involved in the health community. Ashley, who is our wellness co-lead, she and I were looking through fundraisers that were dedicated towards health needs, close to our heart, and we didn't really see one out there. And we had been in contact with these different distribution networks that were in contact with doctors and mental health practitioners on the ground that were needing hundreds of thousands of dollars to address the growing emergency medical needs on the ground. Especially because doctors right now, they're getting persecuted and targeted for even just treating a patient, which is, what their duty is. And they're not even allowed to do so. And they're getting targeted for doing so. So we wanted to have a fundraiser out there so that if people found that health needs was a cause close to their heart, that's something they could donate to. So when we were thinking about, creative ways to boost this fundraiser, we had this idea about an art auction. Because among even GM4MD, we have different designers, or on social media, we were seeing all this beautiful artwork being created. And in the past, for some other initiatives I was doing, I'd done an art auction before, and it was a great way to raise awareness about an issue through a creative means, and also a really good outlet, kind of going back to our wellness component of having the creative expression and cathartic release, and releasing your artwork onto a platform that you can share with an audience and share the stories and meanings behind it. So as GM4MD was centering on its mission of raising awareness and finding creative ways to raise awareness to the international community, we realized that Earth Day was coming up on April 22nd. And a lot of people don't know, but actually the Myanmar military and the coup itself is exacerbating climate change issues in Myanmar. And so maybe our storytelling co-lead Saw can talk a little bit about that before we go into the art auction and other parts of our Earth Day campaign.
Yeah, definitely. So we know that Myanmar's environment and the wildlife hasn't been in good shape for a while because of the military. They have been profiting out of these natural resources. So I'm just going to mention some topics that are really important to emphasize at the moment. One way the coup has been affecting the environment of Myanmar is that the destructions from the conflict. So, for example, the Damados airstrike on the Depuno, that was a really hard hit for the environment because it not only affected the people but also affected the environment and the wildlife, which was look over because a lot of it was a really big thing, and a lot of people died from that. A lot of people got injured for that. So not a lot about the wildlife and the environment was mentioned, but I think that's really important that we need to emphasize. And the second thing is that the research and the conservation trainings has been terminated as of right now. It has been really hard for the researchers to do these things since the COVID happened, because when the COVID happened, all the universities had to go online. So not a lot of research had been done since then. And now that the coup happened, and the internet has been cut off and shut down, and because of the foam walls that have been blocking a lot of sites, a lot of research have been stopped, and a lot of fundings for the research have been stopped as well. And a lot of top scientists that are linked to the universities are also currently hiding. So these research that will restore the environment in Myanmar has been terminated, which is a really serious issue. And the third and the last important issue is that these natural resources, such as the gas and oil, the forests, and the mining, the jewelries, the gems, all of these industries are being heavily controlled by the military or the military-linked companies. So now that the military is pretty much free roaming right now, we don't know what they're gonna do with all of those industry, and our neighboring countries, which are China, Thailand, and India, they haven't sanctioned the MEC, which consist of a lot of these natural resource industry companies. So this is also one of the important issues that I think we should emphasize on the Earth Day campaign.
Yeah, thank you so much, Saw, for providing these perspectives. And just to further emphasize, the Myanmar military has a history of really harming the environment for their own financial gains. And so as the coup continues and as the military continues, especially with internet blockages and with UN and other INGOs pausing research efforts and other climate activism efforts, we don't know how much more the military will continue to harm the diverse and vibrant biodiversity of Myanmar. So this is why it's so important to raise awareness that what's happening in Myanmar, if it continues, will have very long-term impacts, not only on the people, but on the environment. And so this is why we really need to find creative ways to continue outreach. And maybe a lot of people don't know about these climate change issues that are caused by the military and exacerbated by the coup. And so our media and social media teams have been doing a lot of great work in reaching out to especially youth activists and using our savviness with mass organizing and mass outreach to connect with those from the international community and elevating the messages and showing how our work and support for Myanmar is also in solidarity with these other activism movements. So Angie maybe can provide some perspective on the work that we're doing there.
Hi, Sandra. Thank you. Thank you for that. So when it comes to nowadays, a lot of people go online and the outreach has shifted from just emailing and being in contact with media relations on a professional platform to kind of more of a casual thing that people use now. So I dove into Instagram, which at first I was kind of worried, like these are private messages that are not really getting filtered the way I want it to be. But I tend to focus on youth activists in that case because I'm pretty sure a lot of people don't give credit for younger generations nowadays with the creativity and the passion and the motivation it comes. Because at this age, we're really trying to find what matters to us. And I thought it would be great to reach out to these youth activists and combine efforts and let them know this is what we're trying to provide with our campaign and our mission. And we would love to have a collaboration in solidarity with your activism and how it intersects with each other. So it's been really successful as of lately. I've been getting a lot of connections through this platform. I've even tried LinkedIn. I've even tried Twitter, which are extremely not what I expected to use for outreach. But it's just amazing how people actually respond and the generosity of outreach. And it becomes more personal in that sense because we're using such a personal platform. It's not an email with info@info.gmail.com. It's nothing like that. It's like an outlook into their life and what matters to them. So yeah, I'm really excited to keep doing this and see what kind of partnerships and collaboratory efforts can be improved on until the Earth Day campaign fully ends and the impact that it can have.
Yeah, and I think what's so cool and what you guys are talking about is that you're in this event that is being sponsored now. It's not narrowed into like just a limited field of people only being concerned about one aspect of something that's happening here, but it's you're widening it to look at how the environment is being affected. So all the people that are under that banner and that are caring about that issue can also be involved, and especially artists, because when people are looking at what is happening right now, and there is that feeling of, well, what can I do and how can I do it? And one of the guys I interviewed just a few days ago, he's this Australian artist living in Montreal who's been to Myanmar twice. And he was so upset about what was happening that he just went out to his street corner and he just painted this beautiful mural in Montreal just to raise awareness for things that were going on in Myanmar, just to do his part. And so the event that you're talking about doing under the banner of Earth Day and focused on Myanmar is bringing all of those collective, creative, and artistic energies of people who might feel this really strong volition to want to do something or support in some way, but it just feels so far away and they feel like such a small person, given the seriousness of what's happening. And through this auction you're creating, it's allowing so many of those individual pockets of people around the world living their own creative lives to be able to just give something with their hands, with their mind, that can show their concern about what's happening in Myanmar, also coordinate with Earth Day, and then bring in a whole set of donors and participants that are able to get something special and to have beautifully created piece of art, and with all of their funds going towards those communities that are just enormously at need and at risk right now. So it's just a really cool way to bring together a lot of different camps and peoples and interests into one event where everyone gets to benefit.
Yeah, and I've taken a look at some of the pieces so far, and they range through some unique video games to pictures of petri dishes to beautiful artworks and performances. So it's interesting seeing how people conceptualize artwork defining the Myanmar Spring Revolution and the environment in their own unique ways. So Jasmine has been doing our wonderful job of vetting our different pieces, and would love to hear about the pieces you've seen so far.
So most of which are really beautiful digital arts. And when I look at it, actually there are some paintings too, and there's one really caught my attention is a beautiful painting of a Burmese like Buddhist ladies praying, and it's from the view from the back. And as a Buddhist, it's very personal and very beautiful to me. And yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing more like art submission. So we have until April 22nd to submit your art. So if you have if you're an artist and would like to submit, please welcome.
Thank you, Jasmine. On top of that, like for digital art, you can also do so much more with the creativity output. And a friend of mine is actually trying to input a video of his, and he's an artist in dancing and performance art. And he's created a beautiful video of him dancing around in a beautiful environment of nature to showcase what Earth Day means to him and how he has given back as part of this performance community. And he's even done a narrative into that video. So things like that, where it's not just restricted to something on a canvas or something written down. It can be almost anything. It could be you dancing. It could be you emotionally just expressing yourself through any output and platform.
Yeah, that's great that artists are by nature creative and thinking outside of boxes. And so it's really just creating this platform where people can give and do what it is that defines their life and that's most meaningful to them, and then putting it out there for others to make an auction with the funds going for, those that are really needing it, that are looking for a lifeline in Myanmar and trying to continue the nonviolent struggle that we know is going on right now. And this is also so cool and so relevant as well, because of course we're talking mainly about people contributing and also of course buying in the auction outside of Myanmar. But within Myanmar, art has played an enormous role in what is going on. Just unbelievable, the kind of artists that are coming up. And I spoke to someone on the podcast and asked them to explain it. And their view was that there's always been this really powerful art scene, but a lot of the people involved in it aren't able to make a living by doing what they love most. And so they're either doing something completely different on the job, or they're like, if they're an artist or a writer, they're involved in PR or something more corporate and more boring. But because most people aren't working now, they're all motivated in creating the art. And we're seeing, just incredible like rap songs and punk songs and graffiti and original artwork that's being posted everywhere online and on making, t-shirts and posters and other things out of it. And social media, various kinds of social media campaigns and posts and poems, and just so much. I mean, the art that is flowing out of Myanmar right now to express how people are feeling and what they're thinking as this goes on is really quite tremendous. So it couldn't be any more appropriate to call on the artistic counterparts of the people around the world that are supporting what is happening in country by being able to give and support here. And let us not forget that these artists, these celebrities, these creators that are in Myanmar are no safer than normal people. And in many ways, they are less safe. They are being targeted for their influence, for their gifts, for their creativity. And for them to continue to create and to motivate the masses of what they're doing, this is a risk for themselves personally to continue to pursue that art. And so it's really a beautiful thing to be calling upon these artists around the world who have been touched by Myanmar, concerned about the environment, concerned about just injustice that's happening anywhere, and to have this chance to be able to contribute and to show their solidarity, to show their gifts. And it's really exciting to see what will be produced and available for people to check out and to see what they're interested in, and just to window shop in a virtual sense. And this is just a really kind of unique and innovative way to involve a lot of people in fundraising, where it's not just a simple donor giving something and then that money goes to a good cause, but it's so many different people involved that get to be involved in that whole giving process.
Yeah, thank you so much. And the sentiments you expressed really highlight how as you said, and over the past week, a lot of influencers, celebrities, artists, those with a platform and who have been taking the risk to use their platform to mobilize people on the ground. They've been abducted, they've been persecuted, they've been targeted. Yet we've seen that even through this attack on their well-being and their safety, that this only fires up people more, and showing solidarity. And we hope that this art auction also is an honor to all of the artists out there who have been targeted and persecuted. And we hope that the artwork that we're able to create as the international community can in some way reflect all of the beautiful performances and artwork that has been produced out of this movement. I think with when you see a revolution, it also creates so much passion and emotion that really gets funneled into beautiful performances and artwork. And again, like, artwork is very broad in its term. It doesn't just have to be something on a page. It can be a dance. It can be a spoken word performance. So definitely we love seeing how people use their own conception of art and are submitting very unique pieces. And we really look forward to putting it on display for everyone to see at our art auction on April 24th.
So with that in mind, this art auction is just going to be right around the corner from when this podcast gets released. Let's learn a little bit more about the details of how donors and buyers can participate in seeing what kind of artwork is available and participating in the live auction. So Ashley, what are the details about how someone can come on and check all this out?
Right. So as Jasmine mentioned earlier, if you are interested in submitting your art still, and it's before the 22nd, 7:30 p.m. Pacific time, then you can go to our website, or you can go to our Facebook page and submit a Google form, or you can send your actual art or a copy or an image of your art to fundraising@gm4md.org, as long as it's before April 22nd at 7:30 p.m. But if you are interested in seeing the art, please go to our website, gm4md.org. We have a landing page there, and we're going to be having a gallery that shows a preview of all the art, including performances, songs, poetry, paintings. And the actual live event will happen on April 24th at 9:30 a.m. Pacific time. And you can find out more about that on our Facebook page.
Yeah, but we'll also be providing links for that in the episode notes and on our website so that people can easily check that out.
Exactly. And the live event will actually highlight a lot of artists and their work that's pre-recorded and live performances as well.
All right, that's great. So it's not just the actual art pieces that people can see. They could also learn about the background of those people that submitted them.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's really cool. All right, so that's really great stuff. Thank you all for coming on. It's been a pleasure to host so many members of your team. And I think in the coming weeks and months, we'll get a chance to chat with you more about everything that you're doing on an individual as well as an organizational level. And we're certainly talking about supporting and collaborating that on our end as well. So there'll really be a lot to go over when we do. But for now, just thanks so much for all of you for coming on and sharing this, and really want to encourage listeners to come and check this art out. Tell your friends in your community about it. It's really great stuff. And for all of you guys, thanks so much for taking the time to be here with us.
Thanks, Joa.
Thank you so much for having us.
You've been listening to the Insight Myanmar podcast. We'd appreciate it very much if you could rate, review, and or share this podcast. Every little bit of feedback helps. You can also subscribe to the Insight Myanmar podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever else you get your podcasts to make sure you don't miss any of our upcoming episodes. If you can't find our feed on your podcast player, please just let us know and we'll ensure it can be offered there in the future. Also, make sure to check out our website for a list of our complete episodes, including additional text, videos, and other information available at insightmyanmar.org. And I also invite you to take a look at our new nonprofit organization at betterburma.org. There was certainly a lot to talk about in this episode, and we'd like to encourage listeners to keep the discussion going. Make a post, request specific questions, and join in on discussions currently going on the Insight Myanmar podcast Facebook group. You're also most welcome to follow our Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter accounts by the same name. If you're not on social media, feel free to message us directly at info@insightmyanmar.org. Or if you'd like to start up a discussion group on another platform, let us know, and we can share that forum here. Finally, we're open to suggestions about guests or topics for future episodes. So if you have someone or something in mind, please do be in touch. We would like to take this time to thank everyone who made this podcast possible. Currently, our team consists of 2 sound engineers, Mike Bink and Martin Combs. There's of course Zach Hessler, content collaborator and part-time co-host. Ken Pransky helps with editing, and a special Mongolian volunteer who is asked to remain anonymous does our social media templates. In light of the ongoing crisis in Myanmar, a number of volunteers have stepped in to lend a hand as well, and so we'd like to take this time to appreciate their effort in our time of need. And we're always on the lookout for more volunteers during this critical time, so if you'd like to contribute, definitely let us know. We'd also like to thank everyone who has assisted us in arranging for the guests we've interviewed so far. And of course, we send a big thank you to the guests themselves for agreeing to come on and share such personal, powerful stories. Finally, we're immensely grateful for the donors who made this entire thing possible. We want to remind our listeners that the opinions expressed by our guests are their own and don't necessarily reflect the host or other podcast contributors. Please also note that as we are mainly a volunteer team, we do not have the capacity to fact-check our guest interviews. By virtue of being invited on our show, there's a trust that they will be truthful and not misrepresent themselves or others. If you have any concerns about the statements made on this or other shows, please contact us. This recording is the exclusive right of Insight Myanmar podcast and may not be used without the expressed written permission of the podcast owner, which includes video, audio, written transcripts, or excerpts of any episodes. Also not meant to be used for commercial purposes. On the other hand, we're very open to collaboration, so if you have a particular idea in mind for sharing any of our podcasts or podcast-related information, please feel free to contact us with your proposal. If you would like to support our mission, we welcome your contribution. During this time of crisis, all donations now go towards supporting the protest movement in Myanmar through our new nonprofit, Better Burma. You may give by searching Better Burma on PayPal, Venmo, Cash App, GoFundMe, and Patreon, as well as via credit card at betterburma.org/donation. You can also give right on our Insight Myanmar website, as all donations given there are directed towards the same fund. And with that, we're off to work on the next show, so see you next episode.